Oh, God. It's the Premier League's No Room for Racism weekend, which should actually be every weekend, but hey-ho. So it's back, taking the knee. Remember this? Here are our hapless politicians jumping on the virtue signalling take the knee bandwagon when it first began. People who could actually do something useful about stamping out racism, but what did they do? There you have it, folks. Watch and learn, bending down on one knee. Forgive me if I don't jump for joy. This week, the FA treated us to part of their efforts to stamp out racism from football, but instead of doing something tangible and measurable, some players again bent down on one knee in solidarity to show their support, but some didn't, like Leeds United player Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who is of Jamaican descent. That was in their match against Burnley yesterday. I don't blame him. I wouldn't take it either. Why should the burden of solving racism in football be placed on the shoulders of the players? Taking the knee has achieved absolutely nothing other than making people feel better about themselves for doing absolutely nothing. It started back in 2020 as part of the Black Lives Matter movement during COVID times, clearly by people who had nothing better to do, which, if anybody looks into BLM, will realise that it was run by a criminal who was jailed for over £30,000 of fundraiser fraud, spending much of the proceeds on luxury goods for themselves. The players who took the knee back then got a load of stick. The ones who didn't probably felt guilty or under pressure to do so. And as far as the reason they were doing it, nothing has changed at all. For starters, whilst I'm not one for quotas, half the players are non-white, yet nearly all the managers are white. Why is that? You'd think, given the pool of talented players, there'd be a more diverse mix of people at the top. Something doesn't add up. If FIFA or the FA wanted to kick out racism, they could do it easily. They're rich enough. Instead of this ludicrous, virtually signalling gesture, I say, get off your knees, stand on your feet, and actually do something practical to remove racism from the sport.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just living credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Right, I'm joined in the studio by human rights activist Peter Tatchell. Come on, Peter. I mean, I'm of colour. If somebody bends down to take the knee to tell me, hey, listen, I feel really bad for you because of the racism, I'd be like, is that it? Is that all you're going to do? Seriously?
Well, as you know, 2 years ago, the Premier League dropped taking the knee as a routine because it had become repetitive and meaningless.
Yeah.
They are reviving it just for this 1 week for the No Room for Racism campaign to highlight racial equality, unity and solidarity, which in principle is a good thing, but I agree it's only a gesture. And of course, it's entirely voluntary. Players are free to not take the knee, which is their right. But you made very good points. You know, standing up to racism is probably better than taking the knee.
Bending down on one knee.
In fact, one of the players said that. He refused to take the knee. He said, I want to stand up to racism.
Exactly.
And you have highlighted a very valid point that the top echelons of British football are dominated by white men.
Exactly.
And nothing against white men.
Nothing wrong with that.
There are lots of great, brilliant white men in the managerial field. But there is a massive underrepresentation of black and ethnic minority people in those top football positions. And that's what really should be tackled if you want to stand up to racism.
You see, the thing is, I'm not saying that you have to have exactly the same number of black people. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. What I am saying is that it's kind of 50-50 in terms of ethnic minorities in football. So why is there not more diversity at the top? Because it just doesn't make sense, does it? If you've got loads of black people and loads of white people and they're all playing football together and it's kind of a 50-50 mix, you would think that some of that would end up at the top end. I'm not saying there should be quota. Yeah. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. But if that is the diverse ethnic mix of the players, you would think that that would rub off on those making the rules. And somehow it isn't at all. And there are people, many black players, who would love to be managers, but something is obviously stopping them. So what is it at the top there?
I don't know. But one suspects that it's a bit of a boys' club. And if you're not in the boys' club, you're pretty much all white boys' club, you don't get a chance. And there are many former top-class black players who would make brilliant managers, brilliant FA officials, brilliant umpires and so on. They're just not getting the chance. Well, and that's what this whole campaign should be focused on.
Exactly.
Not just I think the gesture's important.
I don't think
it's not. Gestures send a signal. That's important.
There's no signal.
But it's not enough. I think it's a cop-out.
The fact that it's one weekend only, like one night only, I'm going to show you that I care. That's really nice. But that should be every weekend. Every weekend should be a stand out to racism weekend. And that doesn't mean bending down on one knee. That means practical work to ensure there's no racism on the football grounds, no racism on the pitch, no racism anywhere in the sport. But instead, they're doing one weekend to show us that we're
the football authorities.
Ridiculous.
Football authorities could be doing much more to educate young people in the junior clubs. You know, the volunteering junior clubs. That's where bad attitudes often begin. So if you educate people and support people in those junior clubs, then you're going to create a new generation who have no issue with race. And then we will get, hopefully, more black people in managerial position and FA positions at the top. And that's what we need. We need diversity.
Well, I just think that whether it's diverse or not, my bottom line is that it just doesn't add up that you've got so many players who are black and an equal number of players who are white, as in mixed race or what, and then you've got an equal number who are roughly white. So it's roughly 50-50. It's 47 something, but it's pretty evenly split, which means that you would kind of think that nearer the top that would be quite similar as well, because there'll be lots of players who want to be managers of all races. And again, like I said, I don't think there needs to be quotas or exact representation, but to me it just looks a bit odd when you've got so many great players who could manage and they're not doing it.
Yeah, and also lots of individual clubs, the Premier League and the Football Association could be doing educational programmes in schools. That would be far more effective than taking the knee.
Well, also the supporters as well. If there's people in the audience or auditorium being rude, chucking bananas on the pitch, we've got everything these days that we can track, see who's done what. There's facial recognition, there's anything. So how about they have some of that there in the stands?
I mean, fair enough, they do usually crack down on those fans, and those fans do get excluded or fined, and quite rightly. But, you know, I think it's the number one thing to me is education, prevention rather than cure. And we know that most people are good. Most people are kind, compassionate. Let's encourage those values and make sure they're represented on the pitch and in the stands.
But what about the knee?
Well,
so should that not go?
I think
I don't want to see it again. I don't want to see it again.
I think for this particular week, for a specific campaign, no room for racism. I think it's fine, but I don't think it should become a general practice because it's lost its resonance and its punch.
But I think it's actually worse that they're just having one weekend where they're saying no room for racism. And my point I made on there should be every weekend. They shouldn't need to do any virtue signalling gestures. It should be really straightforward. I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah. I think on this issue, no, we agree.
You're supposed to disagree with me. You're supposed to be on it to disagree with me. But I'm sure there'll be those listening and watching that completely think that taking the knee is perfectly reasonable. So let me know.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, but I just don't think it should be done every week, you know.
I think it's actually patronising and quite insulting.
Yeah.
I mean, what do I want somebody bending down on one knee saying, I understand your pain. All right, come on, let's carry on then. I mean, what is that?
Yeah. It's got. You're right. It's got to be much more than that.
Could you imagine if I did that to you, Peter? I understand your pain. All right, let's carry on with what I'm doing now. I'll do the same thing next weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Peter Tatchell, really good to talk to
Thank
you.
you.
We ended up agreeing. I think he agrees with me, although he thinks that this weekend was a good thing to do it once. I think it isn't just nonsense. It shouldn't ever be done.